Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily's The Sidebar, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I'm your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based here in Los Angeles and formerly a LA County prosecutor for nearly a decade. We're recording this on Friday, June 10th, 2022. Today, we are excited to be joined by Mitra Ahouraian, a corporate and entertainment law attorney with vast experience negotiating deals in film, television, and other media. Mitra, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here. A lot of fun stuff going to talk about today, huh?
Absolutely. Lots for us to cover. But before we jump in, Mitra, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got your start?
Sure. So my background is in corporate law. Probably spent about a year or so strictly doing corporate law and then transitioned into entertainment. So I specialized in entertainment and have sort of continued on that path. But I was at a big firm and then a smaller firm, and I've been in-house and I've had my own practice for several years now, which is my happy place. And I also litigated for a few years, litigated a few high-profile cases. So I have a lot of experience in a broad array of areas of the law, but these days, what I prefer to do is represent people in the entertainment industry, film, music, television, and all that good stuff. Influencers, everything is media now, I feel like. So,
Right.
A lot of people in that gamut.
Fantastic. Well, we are going to call upon your vast experience and especially dealing with celebrities, because every single one of these cases today seems like it involves one. So jumping right in, the first case we're going to talk about is jury selection begins for the murder of Nipsey Hussle. 3 years after his death, the trial for the man accused of shooting rapper and entrepreneur Nipsey Hussle is set to begin with jury selection in Los Angeles. Eric Holder Jr. was charged in 2019 with Nipsey's murder. He also faces 2 counts of attempted murder for 2 additional men that were injured during the shooting. The shooting happened outside Hussle's a clothing store called The Marathon in South Los Angeles. It reportedly occurred after a conversation between Holder and Hussle, in which Hussle allegedly told Holder that it was rumored that he was a snitch, not something people in that world and industry want to be called. Prosecutors allege Holder left the premises before returning in a vehicle driven by his then girlfriend and opened fire on Hussle with 2 separate weapons, killing the rapper and injuring 2 other men. Both of the men, Nipsey and Holder, are alleged members of the Rolling 60s gang. Hussle was shot at least 10 times in the incident. His death was shocking to the local community and larger hip-hop audience. A year prior, he had released the album Victory Lap, which garnered a Grammy nomination. All right, let's jump into this, Mitra. Do you feel there's increased pressure for these prosecutors to gain a conviction in this type of a case that's involving a high-profile victim?
Yeah, definitely when there is a high-profile victim with any sort of high-profile case, there are more eyes on the prosecutor and a lot more attention drawn to the decisions that are made, and definitely pressure to convict when, of course, the evidence points to it. Sometimes when, the justice system does not do its job, this kind of bleeds into people feeling like they need to take justice into their own hands. And so I think that pressure is also overwhelming for a prosecutor.
Yeah. Jury selection is slated to last 2 weeks in this case. Do you think they're going to run into particular problems from both sides, prosecution and defense, because we are dealing with such a high-profile figure being killed?
There are so many things that could create prejudice and bias. And when we talk about somebody who's well known in the community, we talk about there are people who might have opinions about hip hop. There are people who might have opinions about, or definitely have opinions about gang members. And so when you try to get a jury pool and you're trying to filter those things out, some of these biases are very subconscious. There are people who will express their opinions, and there are some people who probably maybe grew up in LA around gangs and have ideas, or from television, or So you hope to get a jury pool that is not influenced by these things, but I think that the people that you are selecting from, the pool becomes smaller and smaller when you have these high-profile individuals who are involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The other phenomenon that starts to happen in these types of cases is that you have these jurors who are willing to kind of deceive the system in order to get onto the trial. I mean, I did, dozens of trials downtown. Nobody wanted to get onto my trials. Everybody's trying to get off of jury duty because it didn't involve any kind of celebrity. But in a case like this, and we saw this most recently in the Ghislaine Maxwell prosecution, that there was a juror who was not forthcoming about their prior history and experience with sexual abuse, kind of hid that, and then got onto the jury and tried to influence other jurors. Now, her legal team tried to do something about this, and so far that's not been successful for them. But I think that's another thing to worry about for the prosecutors and defense attorneys. As much time as they have to question these people can just be dishonest about it. The other thing that we're hearing reports about is that there's apparently video that captures the murder. Do you think that turns this into a slam dunk for the prosecution in this case?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the question of whether the shooting happened is not really the question that we're dealing with here, right? So it's the circumstances surrounding it. So whether that video gives us some context, we don't know if that's going to be helpful or hurtful. But the shooting isn't in question. So it really comes down to what's in that video beyond the actual shooting.
Yeah, I have experience with that as well, with video, that oftentimes video can be not manipulated, but examined so in such detail, frame by frame, that you start to lose sight of what you're even looking at. And so I feel like people can be dismissive. Oh, well, there's video. Well, then the guy's guilty. And you'd be surprised what a good defense attorney can do, even with video, and kind of, doing their best to kind of trick the jury or confuse the jury. And that's all they need, right? They just need to confuse the jury. They don't need to actually convince them of anything.
Sure.
So we'll keep a close eye on that case as it continues to develop. But let's talk about Rob Kardashian and Blac Chyna are set to return to trial in her revenge porn suit. This lawsuit dates to 2017, when Chyna, whose legal name is Angela White, sued Rob Kardashian, claiming that he, quote, went on a revenge porn rant that she described as a, quote, form of domestic abuse. Chyna's team alleges that Kardashian posted private photos to his 9 million Instagram followers containing images of Chyna nude in a vicious social media tirade. This is a quote from her lawsuit, designed to hurt and publicly shame Miss White. Kardashian's team, for their part, has requested a delay of the case, claiming that they had reached a written deal with Chyna and her lawyer in this matter. His legal team insists that Chyna and her team acted in bad faith in repudiating the agreement, and they are seeking an order from the court enforcing the parties' settlement. Chyna's legal team alleges that Kardashian also violated California law by revealing alleged details of ongoing settlement conversations. Okay, lot to unpack here, lot to talk about. First of all, what do you think of Chyna's legal team opting to take this to trial? Do you think this thing ever sees the light of day?
Well, it's interesting that they were in settlement talks and there was a change of heart. And I wonder what caused that. You have to wonder what caused that. I think the same motivation for bringing the lawsuit, which is a financial gain and also publicity, is probably the same motivation for why she may have changed her mind. At some point in the negotiations, something happened and she decided that, I want to move forward with this. And a lot of times, if we're having a negotiation and there's a sudden turn, a lot of times that's strategic. So it might be an attempt to either get more money or get something else out of the settlement that perhaps was not on the table. So I believe it's a strategic move, and whether it's going to, make it all the way through to trial is yet to be determined. But
You made a couple of good points that I wanted to talk about, but first I want to stay on this thing about the settlement conversations or negotiations being made public. Can you explain for listeners what limitations are there on revealing ongoing settlement conversations?
Yeah, so that's evidence code section 1152, I believe it is, in California, that says that settlement communications cannot be used for the purpose of establishing liability, meaning who's at fault, who, committed harm against the other, because the point is that you want to come to a settlement. So you don't want what you're being said in the course of trying to settle a case being used against you later. Otherwise, those conversations would be very limited. But they can be brought in for other reasons. So, how are you going to enforce a settlement agreement without putting forth the fact that there is a settlement agreement? So that's different from revealing for purposes of showing who's liable in the case or who isn't liable.
Interesting. The other thing you had commented on was the idea that this may be a strategy move on China's part. Everything that we're talking about nowadays seems like it has to be seen through the lens, especially dealing with celebrities, seen through the lens of the Depp v. Heard trial. Do you think, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but do you think that more public figures are pursuing trials as a way to as a PR move, to kind of publicly tell their narratives to the world rather than handling this all behind closed doors?
Well, first off, I think what Depp did was absolutely brilliant. Sitting down at an interview and telling your side of the story is what celebrities have historically done. To spend 6 weeks in a courtroom having very highly paid lawyers who are very good at creating narratives, tell your story, and asking for cameras in the courtroom so that the public sees that story is absolutely brilliant. And it was a huge risk, right? So I think for any celebrity, the practice so far has been to, let's just try to sweep this under the rug. Let's settle it. Let's pretend, hope it only gets one headline and everyone moves on. And so that's sort of been how celebrities deal with these types of lawsuits. And also, defamation is so hard to prove. I mean, we've talked about this again and again. A celebrity bringing a defamation lawsuit is risky in and of itself and probably not worth their time, because showing that malicious intent is really something that is hard to do. And I think that this case was an anomaly in that sense, but it also showed celebrities that it's possible to bring a lawsuit as a celebrity, that you don't have your hands tied just because, the law has this actual malice standard. And so I think, on the one hand, it did show that it's possible, but on the other hand, do we still have celebrities who want to do what Johnny Depp did? I mean, I think that the majority of celebrities don't want the good, bad, and ugly coming out, and that was something that Johnny was willing to do.
Yeah. You make such excellent points. To me, it was almost like the verdict in that for Johnny Depp was the afterthought. It was really, for him, it was that moment of sitting in court, telling his story, being able to tell the entire world who was watching what had happened to him. And also there was the moment of having her up there and having to explain these things that she said and kind of falling apart during cross-examination. But it was like he wasn't even present in court for the verdict. I mean, it really wasn't about the money. It really wasn't about, do I win or not? I think it was more about telling his story, and people were watching and people were interested. Do you, and we talked a little bit about this too, but do you think, it seems as though we're seeing lots of these cases nowadays involving celebrities. Are celebrities becoming more litigious, or are we just becoming more interested in their lives outside of what they do to entertain?
Celebrities have always been very litigious. They got a lot of money and sometimes a lot to lose and sometimes a lot less to lose. So most litigation, you do a cost-benefit analysis, and sadly, in the majority of instances, what it's going to cost you to bring a lawsuit is sometimes more than you would recover. And for many, many, many clients, the advice is always, it's probably not worth it. You should settle this out. So those lawsuits have always been there. Rarely do we see them go to trial. Rarely do we have the cameras in the courtroom, which is up to the judge's discretion, and that Amber Heard did try to fight. And Johnny Depp won that one. But, we don't these are all very unique circumstances, and I don't know that we're going to see this again.
Oh, so you're saying we're not going to be glued to our TVs watching celebrities hash it out for a little while?
I don't know. Don't get me wrong. This is very interesting for us, but I don't think we're going to get the camera in the courtroom element of it. I think that, in Fairfax County, that was actually the first time that they ever had cameras in the courtroom, and I do not think they anticipated, all the extra staff that they were going to have, and, the security and the process for the wristbands of getting people in and managing press and alpacas in front of the courthouse and the lines. I mean, I don't think that they saw this going this big in this direction. And I don't know that a judge would allow this again.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody saw it becoming what it did. I mean, it turned into just a cultural phenomenon. Speaking about litigious celebrities, Brad Pitt accuses Angelina Jolie of trying to inflict harm in a lawsuit leveled against the actress. The pair has been involved in numerous lawsuits since their 2016 divorce. This one pertains to a French estate and winery, Chateau Miraval, that the pair once shared. Pitt and Jolie became involved with Chateau Miraval in 2008, buying the property in 2012 for $60 million, if you've got that laying around. They were married at the chapel on the estate in 2014. In February of this year, Pitt filed a lawsuit alleging that Jolie violated an agreement when she sold her shares in the chateau without his approval. Jolie sold her shares in the winery to a buyer under the Stolis group. The lawsuit further alleges that Jolie's sale of her shares intentionally, quote, sought to inflict harm on Pitt. It goes on to explain that Pitt grew Miraval into a multi-million-dollar global business while Jolie contributed nothing to the brand's success. Further, he took issue with the buyer, asserting that the sale of the shares to a stranger had malicious intent. Pitt's team is requesting a jury trial in this lawsuit. Okay. Again, do you think this one ever sees the light of day and goes to trial?
There's so much to unpack in just this one lawsuit, but I have to start by saying that this is so sad to me. They had such a beautiful life. Like they had this, chateau and this vineyard that they bought that they were going to have as their family business. They adopted these beautiful children from multiple nationalities. I mean, they were this beautiful couple. And I think that everyone was really hoping that this would, and they lasted for so long. So, what happened is a story for another time, but this lawsuit in particular, there's so much there. It's about hurt feelings. You can't get away from that, right? So that's there. There's a sense of betrayal. Mm-hmm. And this is something that settlement makes sense, but what Brad Pitt is asking for is something that may require the intervention of the courts, because he's actually asking to void the sale. And there's all these other parties involved now, powerful parties, who are probably not going to let that happen. So there might need to be that judicial intervention that makes that determination of, was this a valid sale? Was she allowed to sell without his consent behind his back? Which we can also unpack. But, I think that's going to require a judge. So while normally something like this would settle, because it is about a breach of contract and it is about money, this is exactly the type of case that should settle. This might need need a judge to really come down and say that this sale was valid or not valid.
Yeah. Something you said just made me think. Stolis is no small company, right? I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. I can't imagine they would get involved in this transaction if they didn't have their legal team thoroughly vet whatever kind of contractual obligations existed between Angelina and Brad, right? You would think they wouldn't take the chance on losing out on all of this if there was some sort of agreement between the two of them that she couldn't sell her shares. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. Certainly, Stolis has their legal counsel. Angelina has fantastic legal counsel. They have people. They are sophisticated, experienced in business, and have the proper guidance surrounding them. But there are also some gray areas in the law. There's also some interesting issues of which laws apply, right? So this was filed in California. A lot of these events took place in Luxembourg and France, like the companies are in different places. Yeah. So all we have right now is the complaint, right? So we have the 53-page complaint that Brad Pitt filed. And to me, it's very convincing from a corporate standpoint. It makes sense, but there's also some of the arguments are these implied in fact, contracts or quasi contracts. And so the arguments, they're solid arguments, but it's going to come down to case law. I think this is the type of lawsuit where case law is going to be really important because you have some complexities in the corporate transactions that are going to require looking at some past cases and seeing how these things are interpreted. Very interesting. Wow. Well, we'll keep an eye on this one too, and hopefully have you back because it sounds like you really have your finger to the pulse of this lawsuit. Let's talk about Doc Antle of Tiger fame is facing federal money laundering charges. If this whole Tiger thing couldn't get more and more strange. Antle, a Tiger King subject and owner of the 50-acre wildlife preserve Myrtle Beach Safari, is accused of laundering over $500,000 in cash. The money is believed to be the proceeds of, get this, a smuggling operation trafficking immigrants across the Mexican border into the U.S. Antle is allegedly engaged in the scheme with his business partner, Andrew Omar Sawyer. They reportedly laundered the money by writing checks that were claimed as payment for construction work on the Myrtle Beach Safari Resort. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Antle and Sawyer received 15% of the money that they laundered. It is further alleged that they planned to hide the money by inflating the number of cash receipts from tourists visiting Myrtle Beach Safari. On top of this, he has been charged with multiple felonies related to trafficking and abusing exotic animals. He's also accused of grooming minors for sex and defrauding a wildlife charity. I'm laughing not because it is funny, any of the crimes he's committed, but the fact that this it gets more and more strange, and it's like, it's not just simple money laundering. It's got to be money laundering with human trafficking and the abuse of exotic animals. It just is never ending with these people. Did you watch the documentary, by the way? I did not watch this one, but I was thoroughly entertained by the original Tiger King and then the episodes that followed from that. Definitely grateful for that entertainment during the pandemic. You just can't make this stuff up with these characters. It's like you said, it can't just be laundering. It has to be laundering and animal abuse and sex trafficking and bringing people across the border illegally. It's just there's almost no end to it. And so it's so unbelievable that it's believable from what we've seen from these characters. You're like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. I believe all of that. Like there is no, I almost don't need the trial. Like
had I not watched
that guy doing all that.
Had I not watched the documentary, you might have me stretching my imagination. But having watched that documentary, you're right. Anything is absolutely possible when it comes to these people. Do you think that he actually opened himself up to some scrutiny by being a part of the documentary? And like you said, it was a savior to all of us during the lockdowns and COVID. Everybody I know is watching it. The whole country was watching it. It became another one of those kind of cultural moments. Do you think that these folks kind of opened themselves up to scrutiny, and that might be why he's in the position he is now?
Oh, yeah. They wanted to be in the limelight and they got the limelight. And this is what happens. People start looking at you. People start looking at this crazy guy who's like, a part of this story. Everyone in this story must have some sort of criminal thing going on. And, and people have eyes on you. And now you have the attention of, different organizations, of the police, of, animal rights activists. And of course, you're going to be looked at in, with a magnifying glass. And so absolutely, I think anytime somebody, who has, I think people who have a lot of skeletons and a lot of things to hide should probably not put themselves, in the public spotlight. But again, these aren't the smartest group of people.
Very
sorry to say that.
Mild way of putting it. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll follow that one as well. In the meantime, we have Deshaun Watson, who is now facing 24 civil suits for alleged sexual misconduct. Watson faces additional lawsuits for after 2 more women filed charges. These are in addition to the 22 civil lawsuits that have been hanging over Watson for the last 12 months. These lawsuits allege unwanted sexual conduct by the quarterback stemming from massage sessions. Watson has reportedly denied any wrongdoing. 2 separate grand juries in Texas declined to indict Watson on criminal complaints. Reportedly in October, Watson offered $100,000 each in settlements to the plaintiffs of the original 22 cases. Negotiations were unsuccessful due to an alleged aggressive NDA requirement in the settlement. Watson's legal team has stated that the only reason for the NDA was to facilitate a trade to the Dolphins, who required a settlement of all 22 cases if they were going to make a deal. He remains under investigation by the NFL as well, who could suspend him if they determine he violated the league's personal conduct policy. According to ESPN, Watson's 5-year, $230 million deal from the Browns would be the highest amount of guaranteed money given to an NFL player. And a new report from the Times alleges that this abuse was facilitated by Watson's then team, the Texans, which is remarkable. Watson reportedly required massage therapists to sign NDAs penned by the Texans' director of security. Texans have also may have also facilitated a hotel, the Houstonian, as a location for Watson to receive massages. At least 7 women allege to meeting Watson at the hotel. Okay. From a PR standpoint, Mitra, did his team blow this with their handling of the original attempt to settle and that NDA agreement?
Yes and no. 100,000 is a good chunk of money, and sometimes we are critical of people who are trying to settle cases and pay hush money and get rid of people. So it's not it's this fine balance between, is this going to work? Or are people going to find out about this later if it doesn't work, and question whether I'm actually innocent or not because I was just trying to pay everyone off. I'm a little surprised that it didn't work. The NDA, they have to be aggressive, right? So I don't know what a non-aggressive NDA might look like. But I know in California now the laws have changed. Governor Newsom enacted I can't remember the name of the bill, but you can't include not talking about like sexual misconduct and things of that nature. You can't include that in an NDA, which is really interesting, and that is something that certainly would fall under the purview of this. But I also understand this needing this NDA in order to facilitate, his contract. So I understand that aspect of it too. It makes sense, but I don't know if his PR being more aggressive would have ended up in another outcome, because 100,000 is still a lot of money. Yeah.
You brought up something that I think is very interesting, a conversation that we're having in this country about NDAs, especially related to sexual misconduct. And you point out how Newsom has has the law passed, or is he proposing it? Do you know?
I think it passed.
Wow.
You know what? Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
Okay. I know it was out there, and
fair enough. I hadn't.
I know that he signed it. I don't know. Yeah, we should find out
if it's gone into effect or not. We'll look into that, but. Just that
Luckily,
question.
I haven't needed to give any of my clients an NDA that included a waiver of sexual misconduct.
Good point. Good. But here's the question: is I understand the position of folks who say no, these NDAs are just helping these kind of repeat offenders continue to kind of abuse people or harass people, and all they do is they throw money out of them and have them sign an NDA, and then they're never outed and we can never catch them. I understand that argument. But then at the same time, you have a situation like we have here with Watson where there are no criminal indictments. And so the only kind of recourse that these women have is to try to bring him to court or settle with him along with an NDA. And they're kind of, by not allowing that NDA, or they preventing these victims who might otherwise not have an avenue for recourse? Are they preventing them from an avenue by not allowing for NDAs? If you follow my question.
So I think that if they were to bring a lawsuit, they're going to end up having a settlement agreement that will be a confidential settlement agreement. I don't think that this is the kind of thing that even makes sense to go to a trial. I don't think any lawyer would take this to trial, take on the case and take this to trial. With most of these victims, they're not going to be paying, hourly retainer lawyers. They would have to be paying someone who's working on contingency. And contingency lawyers, unless they think that the money that they're going to put up in order to go to trial is going to be worth it, then they're probably not going to take it to trial. So you're going to end up with a confidential settlement anyway. So why not save everyone all the trouble and not pay attorney's fees and settle it early on? So it doesn't, just from the standpoint of like how things tend to go down, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, like I said, I can see both sides of the argument, but I don't know if the solution is just a law saying you can't use them. Turning back, though, to this case specifically, what liability are the Texans franchise opening themselves up to here? Do you think that they could be brought into a lawsuit?
I don't see a huge slam dunk. I think that they might be brought into a lawsuit simply because, people like to name the big pockets, and it makes sense to name the people who have the most to lose, even from a publicity standpoint. So I see them being named, but whether there's an actual facilitation, I'm not sure. I think that, they paid for him to have access to this membership club. I'm sure they were doing that for most of their players. I'm sure he's not the only one. And I'm sure that, perhaps the security that put the NDA in his locker was probably acting on his own, not as a representative of the team. And so I think you're really trying to kind of pull things together that perhaps are not enough to create that liability. But certainly if they're in a position where they're now doing an investigation and uncover something, then at that point I would expect some liability.
Yeah. You're going to love this next part. You handle people who are celebrities, people who are becoming celebrities, and I'm sure that you're every once in a while in the position of where you have to help them craft a statement in response to something in the news. But here's what happened with Watson's lawyer. Rusty Hardin appeared on a sports radio in Houston and made the unfortunate comments that, quote unquote, happy endings are not a crime. And he goes on to say, doing something or saying something or being a way that makes you uncomfortable is not a crime. Is that the best way to have handled this situation?
No, this guy was not I was almost going to say, what was this guy thinking? But it's clear he was not thinking. And it's not something you joke about. I mean, obviously, it sounds like something he was saying in jest and like, oh, happy endings are not a crime. But it's like, no, they actually are. But, and also the thing of like, oh, sorry you felt uncomfortable, but that's not a crime, kind of thing is not taking the allegations seriously. You can still deny any culpability and deny that these events happened without making light of the seriousness of the allegations. And I think that was a huge mistake. And it's interesting because what we saw, and it didn't get into this, but it's interesting that this was a statement from his lawyer, because what we just saw in Depp, how the statements from Depp's lawyer were attributed to him and resulted in a defamation. So it's kind of like, okay, we got to kind of be careful what we say now. And I don't think that was a helpful statement at all. Yeah,
very good point. It also just shows to me kind of a complete deafness to the culture of the times. I mean, we've been through Me Too. This is not the way we kind of cavalierly, dismiss now 24 different women coming forward saying that they've been abused by Watson. So again, we'll continue to watch this one. Mitra, thank you so much for coming on this week. Where can people find out more about you?
I would say the easiest and best place is probably on social media. My Instagram handle is Mitra ESQ, MITRAESQ, which is also my Twitter, my Clubhouse, if anyone's still going on that. And I would say Instagram is probably, and then you could link to my link tree that has my website and all the other good stuff.
Fantastic. And I'm your host, Josh Ritter. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Joshua Ritter ESQ. And you can find our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And we want to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you'd like us to address, tweet us your question with the hashtag TCD Sidebar. And thank you for joining us at the True Crime Daily Sidebar.